Okay, and then the hypodermis. So hypo meaning below, it's the layer of tissue below the dermis or deep to the dermis. And although the hypodermis is not specifically a part of the cutaneous membrane, remember the cutaneous membrane is just the epidermis and then the dermis, can't really talk about skin and skin structure without mentioning the hypodermis. And so the hypodermis here, how you can tell if you're looking on a histology slide and how you can tell where the dermis ends and the hypodermis begins, there's no, super discrete line that says this is where the dermis ends, this is where the hypodermis begins. But when you start to see the presence of abundant adipose, remember adipose tissue is made up of primarily adipocytes, that's once you see the presence of abundant adipose, that's when you've reached the hypodermis. And the hypodermis, its structure is primarily loose connective tissue, and embedded amongst that loose connective tissue is going to be abundant adipose. And that's because of the function, the structure and function. The structure of loose connective tissue with abundant adipose goes along with the function of the epidermis. And so the function is going to be really to anchor the cutaneous membrane to underlying structures like muscle or bone. Because of the loose connective tissue, abundant ground substance, collagen fibers, elastic fibers oriented in different directions, allows for cushioning, and then the abundant adipose also allows for cushioning of deeper structures. So cushioning, it also helps with anchoring, again, the cutaneous membrane to deeper structures, cushioning those deeper structures, so it does play somewhat of a protective role. It's highly vascularized, so it provides blood vessels for the dermis that lies above it. This abundant blood supply is why a lot of times injections are given subcutaneously through a hypodermic needle. It's because when you administer drugs to the hypodermis, it immediately gets into the blood supply because it has a lot of blood vessels running through it. And then because you see abundant adipose in the hypodermis, another function of the hypodermis is for temperature regulation. Remember, adipocytes, they store lots of triglycerides, and if your body temperature drops below a certain point, what happens is these adipocytes can start cleaving up those triglycerides, and when you break the bonds of those triglycerides and start cleaving them, then it releases energy in the form of heat. And so we're not really breaking the bonds of the triglycerides to use that energy for metabolic reactions per se, but we can break the bonds of the triglycerides to release energy in the form of heat, and then that heat can be used. That heat can then be absorbed by those blood vessels, absorbed into the blood, and then transported and distributed around the body to help maintain body temperature. So that's another role of all of this adipose that's in the hypodermis, is it can play a role in thermoregulation and body temperature control, body temperature homeostasis. And that's the hypodermis.